Well, hello, hello. I know it's been a while since I showed up and shared some intuitive wisdom straight from the animals' mouths. But I wanted to talk to 5 simple ways to resolve behavioral issues when they're actually not behavioral issues. And this whole concept of nurture over nature. Where a lot of times we have conflict and discomfort showing up for our animal companions because in the example of a client of mine today, she's got a cat that was pretty wild and actually attacked her when she tried to break up a cat fight in her home, where this cat's been coming in and eating her cat's food and actually terrorizing them. They were really, really very unsettled when I saw them today. And I know that we don't know what we're capable of actually doing or being until we're in a situation where those that we love are threatened. So I want to talk to this whole concept of nurture over nature, or nature over nurture. And looking at when are behavioral issues not behavioral issues, because we see this in the wild, in a pack of coyotes or wolves or jackals or predatory types of animals. Oftentimes we see this with our dogs as well. A wolf or a lion as well will attack a weak or injured species of their pack or a different pack and often kill the newborns if there is something that is not right with them, if they're not going to survive because they have a health issue or a disease that's going to weaken the strength of the line. Nature always breeds, it's the survival of the fittest. It's an innate drive that's built in to always ensure that the species, the line, is kept strong and at its peak. So oftentimes, if you have a multi-pack household, you'll see this with animals where all of a sudden they start attacking the weak one or the sick one in the house. And I certainly had my cats do this with Winston, my blind hyperthyroid cat, at the end of his days, because they realized that something was off, and that is their natural drive. So it has nothing to do with behavioral issues. It has nothing to do with your dog or your cat being a bad cat. It's that they are always looking for the survival of the fittest, and they sense that. That's why we see so many service dogs these days being trained to sniff out cancers in people, and more therapy animals showing up in hospice and with the aging, because they are so good at helping us release serotonin and dopamine and all those feel-good hormones. And oftentimes, if your dog is weak or sick, and remember, cats are incredibly good at hiding when they're ill because it's part of that natural driver. So it's nature over nurture. That for them to show that they're weak or injured would mean death for them in the wild. And we see this in dog parks where we think our dogs are absolutely fine, and out of nowhere another dog comes and attacks your dog, or your dog goes and attacks another dog, because they are sensing that there is something wrong or something off. And where animal communications can really help to shift this in a beautiful way into two-way open conversation. Do we have a conversation? Inspiration through communication is where we get to do change. And if you didn't join me for that 5-day mini series, where I really spoke to a lot of topics that are not really covered in the basics of animal communication programs or books that you get out there, please go and have a look at this, because I did one whole day just on how to resolve conflict with animals or insects that we kind of have judged as being pests because they're in our space and we don't want them there. And how to sort of soften your heart and see it from the animal's perspective. Because when you can start to communicate with the animal in question, the one that is doing the attacking or the one that is spraying all over your kitchen or eating your cat food or attacking your dog or just generally creating havoc and unsettling your own animals, it'll definitely help you to really open up and really trust in the power of interspecies communication. So when I spoke to this cat that was hurting my clients' cats and eating their cat food and spraying all over her house, and when she tried to actually tell it to go away and turned her back, this cat actually, she called it a demon cat because he literally took his claws and he showed no fear. He was like totally fearless, and he attacked her. When I connected with this cat, he showed me that he had nowhere else to go, and this particular client, she has incredible healing energy in a beautiful, peaceful space, and it's very enticing. She has a Heidi doll, a couple of them that actually learned how to get into her house through her cat flap and help themselves to her cat food. So we had to talk to the Heidi dolls and say, you know what, this isn't really working, and I know that you were abandoned or that your parents left you and you'd never learned how to actually use your beautiful long beak to dig for insects and feed yourself. How can I help you with that? Things have started to change. And oftentimes too, you know, we need to learn those 3 P's: patience, presence, and persistence. Just like a 2-year-old. Think of it like you're speaking to a 2-year-old with most animals, because that's kind of what they understand. And how would you speak to a 2-year-old? And oftentimes, if your animal is telling you that something is off and they don't know what to do with all that pent-up energy, or perhaps they're being abused, they're going to lash out, or perhaps they feel threatened, they're going to lash out, and you're going to see it as a behavioral issue, or that they're bad, instead of like actually just starting to look at how can we deepen into mindful regard and speak in a way that is a two-way conversation, that you're not talking at them, because of course they also can't learn or change through that realization process that there is a different possibility or choice available to them if you're not able to impart that information to them. And I think this is really where, firstly, it's really, really important to remember that an animal's behavior always makes sense from the animal's perspective. I've spoken to gorillas and I've spoken to monkeys, vervet monkeys, that are sort of deemed as pests in the Cape area, where they kind of look at us and the way that we hoard food and don't eat what we're growing. If you have a vegetable patch, and how we hoard in their perspective, it's just like there's more than enough for everybody, so why can't I help myself to it? And then unfortunately they often end up being shot and hurt and maimed and trapped in horrendous situations where they suffer a very slow death because we are not using that capacity to communicate and create a win-win for others. So just know that there is always this very strong instinctive component that will always drive over learned behavior. And it's really important that we recognize that every animal is an individual, and we can't generalize behaviors about particular species, even though we do rank. We do judge one species as, more important than another, or that they're a pest or they're dangerous based on, unconscious people that make movies like Jaws, or that, the dolphin movies that has created an industry. And I can't remember the name of that guy, but that created that movie Flipper. But, you know, he is very remorseful in doing everything that he possibly can to right the wrongs of what he created in the trade of wild dolphins, and the horrendous conditions and the depression and the anxiety and the very slow death that they suffer under, because we're taking them out of their natural environments. So, you know, we all make mistakes. And as I've been doing this animal communication work my entire life, but as a professional for almost 20 years now, and I'm still learning and I still make mistakes, and I often do project onto animals, and I need to bring myself back to center. So be gentle with yourself. Ask the animals to support you in that, and just know that a lot of times the conflict that occurs in domesticated animals is between an animal's natural drivers, their instinctual response that is part of the species that they belong to, and that the preferences and the requirements of cohabitation, right? They are living with our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions. They're living in complexes where we're all on top of each other. And if your cat has a very wide zone, he thinks the whole neighborhood belongs to him. And if he's patrolling that, he's going to protect his space. Cats are a little bit more freer than dogs are when they're living with us. But when we can start to just have more empathy towards that, then we can start to look at how we can create a win-win by honoring their desires and their soul urges, just like we can honor our own. And again, why I come back to animals being the best medicine and the most patient, generous, forgiving teachers that we could possibly be offered up. So some of my suggestions on how to do that, and I've given you two already, is to be patient, to go at the pace of the animal, to really put your judgments aside and your projections and apologize. Say, I'm so sorry that this is happening. How can I change this for you? Communicate with the animal to get their perspective on the situation using this beautiful power of interspecies two-way telepathic communication. It's the best gift you could give to yourself and to anybody who loves animals. And I think that's so important, is to establish trust before you start to look at why are you doing something that you don't like to, because you'll feel that it's charged. And if there's an emotional charge on it, it's just like when the adrenaline is up, learning goes down. So, you know, go straight to the animal. Get it direct. Ask them exactly what they need in order to change this, and then be willing to follow through. Be willing to act upon the information that they give you. And if it's not going to work for you, tell them that it's not, and ask them what else they can do and what the consequence of not changing this could mean for them, because you care. You're going to show them worst case scenario. So do it. Speak to them. And the more you do this, the more confidence you're going to get in your innate ability to communicate with other species. Or get the assistance of somebody like me that is trained and qualified as an animal communication. So don't assume anything about an animal's behavior. Do not generalize. And don't make rash decisions based on fear. Never make choices out of fear or an emotionally charged situation. Push pause, take a few breaths, ground yourself, and really start to deepen into, you know, what's underneath this? What do you need to shift before you open up into that two-way conversation where you're not shutting out the animal's point of view? And I think that's where the empathy and the compassion comes in. So it's really important to establish trust before you go deep. And then to look at widening your perspective, looking at the situation from all sides, and what the situation is for the animal, getting the whole big picture thinking and the perspective of the animal from a physical, emotional, mental, catharic, etheric, all the energy bodies, all the bodies, the countenances, the head, the endeavors of the animal. And ask the animal, what might be influencing this? How can I support you in that? Maybe something's changed in the environment. And remember, they're here to teach us how to be good human beings as well. And when you can sort of get their perspective, it always surprises me. You can't make this stuff up when it's clear and it's authentic and it's honest and in its communication on how you're receiving it. And I think a big way to go back to opening our hearts and remembering that we are the stewards, we're the guardians of this planet and the animals and the other non-human species we share this planet with. And we cannot do that from a place of judgment or shutdown or projection or assumption. Don't assume anything. Just don't. And also remember, as I said, it's oftentimes it's nature over nurture. I've seen cats that have been neutered still spray if their space is feeling threatened, or there's another cat or a feral cat coming into their home or into their environment. And I always kind of say, imagine even when you're bringing a new animal into your family. Imagine how if you had a daughter or a son, you had a child, and you decided without speaking to your child or the other family members how they would feel about bringing in an orphan, a street kid, and going, you know what, you have all the creature comforts, so I'm going to give your bed and your room to this orphan because shame, poor child, he's never known comfort like you have, and you can sleep on the floor in my room for now. That's kind of how animals feel when we bring other animals into the family without consulting them. So I always suggest, and this is something that I offer in one of my services to my clients, is if you're considering getting a new animal companion into your pack, let's book a session and have a group meeting and see how everyone in the pack feels about having a new family of a member of the family join us. And be willing to listen to what they have to say and their concerns, and also know that sometimes they will change their mind. That happened with my cat Toby when I didn't choose them. Sky and Winston chose to come home with me when I was actually doing a matrix session and a pairing for another one of my clients at the shelter, and I came home with 2 cats. But I didn't bring them home. I asked every single member of my existing pack, which at that time was 5 cats and 3 dogs, how they felt about it. And everybody was like, cool. And because they had all been rescued and adopted and been in that similar situation. And Toby, my big connection to the white lions, who's no longer with me, he's in spirit now. He was a little bit wary because he had basically grandfathered the whole pack. He was the oldest of my pack. And the day that he heard my husband drive in, I had clients that day, and he was in the outside clinic with me. And I knew they were home because I heard him and his whole body stiffened up, and he went, "Oh crap, I've changed my mind." And I had to do some work with him and say, it's okay. I hear you. How can I make this more comfortable and an easier transition and for you with these new beings in the house? And we managed to work it out. But sometimes nature will override that. So always get the animals' point of view on the situation and ask them how things could be different or what you could change in order to make it more less stressful and more joyful or easy or peaceful for them. Because sometimes they're going to say yes and sometimes they're going to say no. And sometimes, like Toby, there's going to be a yes, and then later are like, oh crap, I'm not sure, and maybe I don't want this anymore. And then you need to do the collaboration and the negotiation that I talked about in the 5-part mini series when we talked about this in depth. So understanding that sometimes the solution will be very clear and very, very in your face once there is that understanding of where your other animals are coming from. And then you can achieve the desired outcome. And other times it will be a little bit more tricky. And because you have an emotional involvement, because you love them and you care for your animals, you maybe need an impartial view from somebody that can just hold the space, like a professional animal communicator, who can be that channel and that communicator between you and your animal, because there's no emotional attachment, there's no vested interest in the outcome. It's just an honoring of holding that space, and something that I really love to do. So just be aware, be mindful to not project or impose your human perspectives or ideas or values or programming on how things should be in these sort of interspecies negotiations. And don't think of it like you have domination or power over animals. You both entered into the soul contract and agreement to learn and grow and evolve together. And animals really do come into our lives to teach us how to be patient and persistent and generous and forgiving and compassionate, and work from there. And if you do get a no, honor it. Just honor it. Don't try and speak to somebody. No means no. There, as much as I always talk about the importance of boundaries and energy management in our own interrelationships with other people, the same goes for other animals too. So interfering in that sort of natural pecking order when one of the animals passes, of course, the whole pack, whether it's human or animals, we have to adjust. Things have to shift. Somebody needs to step into that role in their own unique way. It's never going to be the same, but we need to do that. And when we interfere from the place of separating or locking our cats up or taking really desperate measures, nothing really changes. But there are ways that you can start to change your lifestyle. Use different kind of leashes, use pheromones in your house just to calm your animals down. Give them CBD oil if they've been traumatized by, like in the case of my client whose cats were attacked by this feral that was coming in and eating their food. And safety first. Safety is always the number one priority, always, for you and your pack. And just remember, sometimes instinctive or natural behaviors, they can be worked through with patience, with compassion, with species appropriate training or behavior modification or changes in your animal's environment or the diet, especially for some of the cats that are very instinctively territorial. They show aggression, and they also show fear aggression if they feel trapped. So, if you have a multi-cat household and they start spitting and spatting at each other, and that's a very common complaint that I get the privilege of resolving for people. Sometimes it's just about adding more litter boxes in the house, or giving them safe spaces so that they can move away when there's that sort of aggression that's coming up. And I must say, I'm really thrilled. Our little new tiger cat, who's Sofia, my little Bailey, he's been with us 3 weeks now, and it's been a very slow progression with him. We've got a big house and we've got a big grounds, and it's been a very slow. He's been fantastic with the dogs from day one, pretty much, and he knows they're not a threat, and they actually are very curious about him because he's so little. And my other 3 girls, my cats, are all girls, and Splash is very mothering. She's got a very mothering energy, So it took her about a week, and she's really stepped into that role. And I've been telling her how happy and how proud she must be to have a new little kitten under her wing, because she brought up the last two, Princess and Snowy, when they came in. And my wild child Princess just keeps to her own, and of course she hisses at everybody, but she purrs at the same time, and she loves her up, and then she eats, and she's very much her own field agent. And her sister Snowy is a real lounge lizard, and she's the one that's taken a little bit longer to really get used to this new kitten in the space. And I think it's just about honoring each of their different personalities, and just allowing them to work it out and establish their own hierarchy within the pack or the matrix or the family constellation. And of course, all of that works beautifully. If you're not confident enough yet to do it yourself, is get somebody like me to support you in those sort of integration periods or changes in the pack. Because that's what I love to do, is not only support people that love animals to resolve trauma in their own lives and in their animals' lives, but also to teach you, to remind you, perhaps is a better word, that this is innate to all of us. We can all intuitively, psychically talk to animals and other species, and it's just a remembering. And I really want to support you in knowing that there is always a kinder, more compassionate win-win situation. Nobody has to lose. And when you can start to learn how to skillfully negotiate and work with all kinds of situations, which I cover in my complete works of being human through animals, communication and bodywork healing online program, everything starts to change, and it's so exciting to get the feedback from you all. So, have a look at that. If you're interested in interspecies communication or behavioral issues, or working with animals, if you're a vet tech or you work in a sanctuary, or you want to volunteer at a rescue shelter, these processes and these tools are invaluable. They're life-changing. And just knowing the 5 basic what I call fast aid, because they work so fast, first aid techniques that are hands-on or off-body healing processes, they literally have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. And I want everybody to have that, because we're mammals too. And of course, first aid is first aid. So it's fantastic to be able to have the confidence in an emergency situation to know that you can take aligned action and create a life-saving situation while you're waiting for the ambulance, or waiting to take your cat or your dog or your horse to an emergency vet. So I really want to encourage you to just remember that true animal communication, it's not about giving generalities about what you think you know or about what you do. It's really about being the conduit or the channel or the interpreter. I like to think of myself as just the mouthpiece, the voice between the animal and their person. And it comes from a space of vulnerability and purity, to be an allowance and empathy and compassion if they're in pain or in their joy or in their deep truth. And it's all linked with the heart of the animal and the person in the relationship. It resonates so deeply. And when we can start to communicate from a space of mutual cooperation and trust and mindfulness in our actions, it's such a beautiful opportunity to get to the heart of any problem or any issue. Or anywhere where you're seeking resolution, not just with your domesticated animals, but wild animals as well, because you're starting to look at what's going on from the animal's perspective with regard. You're hearing them, you're saying, I see you. Do we have a conversation? Are you with me? It is inspiration through communication, and because you always end on a high note. So that's kind of part 5 of that is, no matter what happens in those two-way dialogues, always end on a high note, end with praise. Again, go back to think about a 2-year-old that's learning something new, or realizing that they have choice, and how good they feel when you actually remind them. I mean, who doesn't need to be reminded that, wow, you must be so proud of yourself, or I'm so thankful. Just that active appreciation and the gratitude in the way that you're showing up can really help to dissolve a lot of difficulties and come up with new awareness and answers and possibilities, and allow that to come through in a good way. So I know it's a big topic and quite complex, this one of nature over nurture, or nurtured over nature. And it does. It ties into all the work that I do with neurophysiology and the nervous system and the circuitry in the brain and the gut. So there's a lot of nuance and variation, which is why I really want to offer that to you in the Being Human Through Animal Communications, or book a private session with me. But whatever you choose, just remember that when you set the intention and you make a commitment to start to really listen in a felt sense, and you start to learn, because you're being clear in your asking, you're being clear in the accuracy of the information that you're downloading or receiving from your animals. Wow, the possibilities are just endless, and it's so fun because you start to discover new things about yourself, and you start to release and heal, which is the beautiful thing about this. Is a lot of times animals will do behavioral issues that are not, I'm not talking about the nature of it, but certain behavioral issues to get your attention, that there's something in your life that you need to look at. So when you start to develop an openness and a vulnerability to understand the perspectives of all beings involved, it can go a long way toward helping to resolve difficult and sometimes dangerous situations and behavioral challenges with not only your animals, but other animals as well. So just remember, that is the power of trusting that you're enough, trusting that you can hear your animals and receive and talk to them, and to be your own Dr. Doolittle. So I hope that those 5 tips on supporting you in understanding and resolving behavioral issues, and what is a real behavioral issue, and what is actually a very natural one. And let me know your insights, your comments, your questions, and take a look. I have a special running at the moment. It's only $149, and I offered that a couple of weeks ago for White Friday, because I realized from all the feedback and all the sort of common concerns that come up over and over again, that I really think it is not just necessary, but it is essential to our livelihood. It's essential to a sustainable planet, that we learn how, each and every one of us, even children, they really get this, how to work with entities and spirit guides and angels and the unseen realms, the elementals, and to also know how to clear spaces and people and businesses from detrimental entities. And there's a lot of psychic attacks happening out there, as fast as the collective conscious field is closing some of these old negative portals. More are showing up because there's pushback, because that old system is dead. And like anything that you start to change, there's always some kind of pushback. So it's a beautiful program that includes my entire talk to the animal guides, entities, spirit helpers, team players, and it includes those 5 life-saving first aid techniques, along with a whole lot of ways to start building trust with all animals, including your beloved animal companions. So take a look at that. I will post the link below. And of course, if you want to reach out and you want to explore how to learn to talk to your own animals, or just build more confident if you're already doing that, just reach out, PM me. You know where to get hold of me over at sarahjanefarrell.com. And let me know if this was helpful. Comments, questions, what else you'd like me to speak to. It would be my absolute honor to support you in any way I possibly can. And wherever you are, remember, you're enough. Trust you're enough for your animals. You're enough for your body, and you are enough for life. And let life have at you. Let life move you and touch you in those beautiful places of real heart resonance. And I'll meet you there. All right, take care. Bye. Oh, I've got paint on the end of my nose. I was painting my daughter's room today. That is so funny. I just realized I got paint.